Hi there, everybody. I think we're ready to get started. My name is Susie, and I'm the Director of Communications here at Appier, and we are really pleased to be talking to you today about using AI in personalization to increase e-commerce customer engagement. And I will hand you over to our speaker in a moment, but just a small housekeeping item. We are happy to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a small hand icon, and you can click on that and type in a question for us, and we will answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. So now I will hand you over to our VP of Enterprise AI, Charles Ng, to take you through today's program. So Charles, over to you.
Thank you, Susie. Let me share my screen. Okay. All right, can everyone see this all right? Okay, cool. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charles. Welcome to our webinar. Today I'll be talking about AI-powered personalization and how we can transform customer engagement in e-commerce. Okay. So first of all, a little bit about our company. So Appier is a technology company first and foremost, and the goal of our company is really to provide AI solutions to help enterprises solve their most challenging business problems. Okay. We were founded in 2012 in Taipei, but these days we are really pretty global, I have to say. We are in 14 different offices across the APAC region, ranging from Northeast Asia, Tokyo, Seoul, all the way down to Southeast Asia, Singapore, KL, Jakarta, etc. We work with a lot of customers. I'm not going to name each customer one by one. You can just take a look at this list. I'm pretty sure you will see one of your favorite brands on this list somewhere. Okay. All right, so let's start by talking about some key challenges that marketers are facing today. Okay, these are the four major pressing issues that most marketers are thinking about on a daily basis. The first problem is that cost of digital ads are going up, but performance keeps going down, right? So the first question is, how do I actually convert my traffic effectively, right? The second problem is, how do I find people who are interested in what I'm selling? How do I find new customers with needs? Because I don't want to go spamming everyone, right? It's not a good thing to do, and it's going to cost a lot of money. So how do I actually acquire a good target audience? All right. The next question that's on people's minds is, once I get these people on board, once I get these people in as paying customers, how do I understand them a little bit more? How do I know what their additional needs are? Okay. Why do I want to do that? It's mainly to cross-sell and upsell to these people, increase their market basket. Okay. And finally, as we all know, people churn. People churn all the time, right? So people, leave for various reasons. How do I actually understand what's going on in their minds right now? How do I know what their recent needs are right now? And that's going to help me reactivate these dormant users and churned users. Okay. Now, to solve all of these problems, we really need to think about having a personalization strategy. Okay. Now, people these days, customer bases these days are very diverse, right? You could have teachers who are interested in Bitcoin. You could have investment bankers who are interested in writing his first travel book. You have scientists who likes music, and you have bloggers who like interior design. Okay, so being able to reach out and communicate with people in areas that they're interested in is very, very important. Okay? But that's not all. On top of that, you also need to think about where someone is in their customer life cycle, depending on whether you are a new customer or if you are someone who's getting used to the site, or if you are a loyal customer, or you're someone who's about to leave. We should be personalizing the customer experience based on that as well. So in order for customer engagement to really succeed, we're going to need a really highly personalized customer experience. Okay, so 756 billion, this number is the amount of lost retail sales due to poor personalization. Okay, and this is in the US market alone. So 756 billion is roughly 15% of total US retail sales. Okay, so that's a lot of money left on the table. Okay, now what is poor personalization? If you take a look at this picture on the right, this ring, fancy looking ring with the 3 colored gems. Now, if you're sending that to me, now that would be poor personalization, because I have absolutely no interest in something like this. But if you know that it's my wife's birthday coming up in the next 2 weeks, then you're doing a very good job. Okay, so that's personalization for you in a nutshell. Okay, now the problem is only 22% of people are receiving relevant personalized experiences. Okay, only 22%. And one of the reasons for that is that a third of retailers have no ability. They have limited or no capability to do any personalization at all. Okay, this is a fairly surprising number, given that people all believe that it's a very important thing to do. So someone went out, did a survey, asked a bunch of marketers, and asked them, okay, what do you think is a difficult tactic to implement? And in the list you had things like data-driven personalization, content marketing, technology usage, SEO, social media, search, email, etc. And probably not very surprising, 63% of people feel that data-driven personalization is a difficult tactic. That makes it the most difficult tactic to implement out of everything that's in a marketer's toolbox. Okay. So why is this the case? What makes data-driven personalization so difficult? There are actually quite a few reasons for this, and I'll talk a little bit about some of them. The first thing is data is fragmented. Okay, 48% of companies store their data in 4 or more different systems. Okay, this means that within a company, each business unit, each major business unit, has their own little silo of data. Okay, it is in their own database. They don't share it with other people. It's in a format that's different from everyone else's, usually. The data itself might mean different things depending on which system you're in. So data is all over the place. Okay, and one thing that data scientists don't tell you about is that they spend a lot of their time just pulling data together. Many data scientists spend 50% or more of their time simply just figuring out where all the data is and getting it into one place and in a form that they can actually use. Okay, so this is a pretty big hurdle for anyone who's trying to do data-driven personalization. Okay. Another problem that occurs is that most companies have a limited view of their customers, right? I mean, everyone only sees this little window of whatever their customer is doing. For example, if you are a cosmetics company, you sell cosmetics goods, all you know about your customer usually is something like, well, she likes cosmetics. That's about it. Okay. Now, even if you are a huge general retailer that's carrying 30 different categories, many people would be surprised at how much you actually know about your customers. This is because customers in general, have habits. Okay, they only browse certain things on your site. They only buy certain things on your site, right? And generally, people out of 30 categories, most customers usually just buy maybe one or two of them. Okay, so even if you have a large assortment, even if you're carrying a lot of things, you don't necessarily know a lot about your customers. Okay. Now, the third thing is that productization of personalization, of data-driven personalization, is quite a long iterative process, right? So assuming that you have your own data science team, you built up your own team trying to do personalization. This is what they're going to end up doing. Okay. You give them a problem, say, oh, I would like to find all the people who are about to churn. Okay, the first thing the data scientists will do is that they will spend a lot of time cleaning up the data. Right? Remember in the previous slide, we said that data is all over the place. Right? They're in different formats. They mean different things. The data scientist actually has to go clean that up, put it into one place where they can actually use it. Now, once they finish doing that, the second thing that they need to do is to start building AI models. So that's usually what people think about when they think about data scientists. Now, sometimes you have seen this before. You can easily use whatever you know. But a lot of times you end up having to do a lot of research. That means you have to read up on some papers, you have to experiment a little bit, and finally you have to pick a few models that will work for this particular problem. Okay, that could take a few weeks. And finally you get to the step where you're actually training the models. Training the models means taking the data and pushing it through the model so you can get something that's usable. Typically, this is fairly fast. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. But if you're unlucky and you pick something like a deep learning model, that could also take weeks of time. Okay, and finally, you get to an evaluation step where you're trying to evaluate if your model is doing a good job or not, is it accurate or not. The first time you do this, there are usually two things. One of two things will happen. Okay, the first is that you will end up with something that's too good to be true, right? The second thing that could happen is that you end up with something that's too bad. Okay, it's never where you really want it to be, right? So the first thing, if it's too good to be true, usually this means there's a bug in your code. So you have to go find that bug, you have to fix it, and you have to do it again. Okay. If it's too bad, that usually means there's no bug in your code. It usually means that your data is not clean enough, you don't have good enough data, or maybe your models are not good enough. You should pick a better model. Okay. In any case, you will have to do this again. I mean, usually this takes about 2 to 3 iterations if you're lucky, right? So a project like this could take up to 2 to 3 months. Okay, so the productization of personalization really takes time, and it's an iterative process. Okay, so this doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing personalization, right? It just means that there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers, right? People who are actually able to execute on this are going to come out on the winning end, right? So how, assuming that we all want to be winners, right, how can we use AI to drive personalization? Okay, so what role does AI play in all of this? Okay, well, the first area where we can actually apply AI to is dealing with this problem of fragmented data. Okay, so these days everyone has multiple devices. Okay, I have 5 devices, right? I have a work laptop, I have a home computer, a couple of tablets, and I have a cell phone. So to many retailers, to many e-commerce players, I'm actually 5 different people because I don't necessarily log in. Okay, so we can actually use AI to try and predict which of these devices belong to the same person, right? That allows us to tie all of that data together to get a user level profile, right? So there's a lot of talk about customer centricity, right? And one would argue that you cannot really have customer centricity without dealing with this problem first. Okay, so having this user level view is fundamental, but that's not all. The next thing we want to do is we want to start building 360 profiles for that particular person. Okay, now one way to do it is if we can collect each person's behavior either on your site or on in general on the internet, we can actually apply some of the more recent deep learning models to predict what each person's interest is, right? So what we collect would be something like raw data, like this person visited a certain page, a sports and home page, or maybe fashion page or travel and tech page. So this is raw data, right? In order to actually get from that to data like golf, that this person here likes golf, biking, pots, containers, shoes, shirts, etc. We do have to apply some level of AI. Okay, so this allows us to build 360 profiles of this customer, not only from data from your site. We can also do that from a person's general browsing behavior as well. Okay, now once you have these 360 profiles, you can start doing some microsegmentation. Okay, so let's say I want to find all the people who might be interested in going to France, booking a hotel in France, let's say, right? I could segment by people who like France backpacking, fashion week. I could segment by people who like the Eiffel Tower, Paris vacations, French language, boutique hotels, etc. So there are so many different things that we can do to generate these microsegments and to experiment and to find which one actually works best for us, right? So the first time people get their hands on this sort of functionality, what they will end up doing is that they will start playing around with it. They'll start creating all these different microsegments. But at some point, if someone is going to say, oh, having all this power and flexibility is great, but can you tell me what is the best way to find this group of people? What is the best way to find a group of people who are interested in going to France? Okay, this is where AI comes in, right? Because AI has the ability to detect these hidden patterns that humans don't really see, right? So if you take, for example, each of these lines here would be a customer journey, a user journey. This person, he bought some headphones, did an online search, ignored some sort of promotion, viewed something on a tablet, favored a product. What's he going to do next? Well, I don't know what he's going to do next, but AI is going to know that. I mean, AI can actually predict what's the probability that this person will take a certain event in the next hour or the next week. Okay. To make that a little bit more concrete, let's go back to this example where we're trying to find people who might be interested in going to Paris. Okay. Now you could try and segment by all these different dimensions. You could say, I want the people who are interested in France travel, they responded to a certain campaign, Europe travel, backpackers, foreign exchange, and stocks. What you could do is you can take all of this data and you can throw it into the AI model, and it will automatically calculate for you which dimension is the best. It will tell you, all right, look, France travel is not bad. I'm going to give it a 33% weight, but it's better if this guy is a frequent traveler. I'm going to give that 85% weight, or if he's looking at EVA Airlines recently, right? And by the way, if he's interested in China travel, he probably will not be interested in going to France. So I'm going to give the guy a negative 10% weight. Okay, so that's how you can actually use AI to find the most suitable audience for Paris. Okay. Now, up to now, we've been talking about trying to find the right audience, like who is the best people to actually target. The next question, once you figure that out, the next question is what? What am I going to show to these people, right? So how am I going to find the right product to show to each customer, right? So this problem is called a recommendations problem. Okay, this is a fairly well-established field. Recommendations have been around for quite some time, more than 10 years at least, and there are quite a few classical recommendation techniques that are out there. For example, you could use things like view also view, you could use things like hot items, or whether or not someone carded a certain product. These are pretty standard techniques that have been around for some time. Now, with the advent of AI, however, that has opened up some avenues for newer algorithms. For example, I might want to find, I might want to recommend items that have similar images, right? Here's a striped shirt. Let's show the person another striped shirt. Or I might want to show products that have similar features. For example, here is an AirPod. I want to show something that maybe like a headphones, for example. Okay, so the next, here we're trying to address the question of what is the right product to send to each customer. Now, once you know who and what, the next question is where, right? Where meaning which channel do I address my audience on, right? So take a look at this example here. So Jasmine, she likes to browse her iPad on the weekends. On Saturday afternoons, she's browsing her iPad, she's looking at different dresses, but she doesn't make a purchase, she doesn't log in, okay? In fact, this is actually quite a typical behavior for many countries where people do their browsing during the weekends, but they only make their purchases during the weekdays, okay? So as the retailer, you would be interested in trying to send Jasmine some sort of promotion, perhaps. But here's the problem: most people are not on their iPads all the time. Okay, many people are usually on their tablets only during the weekends or during the evenings. Okay, so one thing we could do is we could try and find if Jasmine might have a different device, right? If you recall at one of the earlier slides in the deck, we can actually use AI to try and predict if certain devices belong to the same person, right? So using that technology, we can actually see that, oh, Jasmine might also have an iPhone, right? So on Monday morning, when she's on the subway on her way to work, we might want to send her a message reminding her that, hey, these are something that you might like. Would you like to make a purchase? Okay. All right. So up till now, we have been talking about personalization from the technology point of view. Here are the different tactics, here are the different techniques that you could apply in AI to these problems. What about from the execution point of view, right? So how do we actually implement these things? How does it actually look when I take this and implement it into the customer experience? Okay, so the next few slides we'll be talking a little bit about that. Okay, so the most obvious or the simplest way to apply personalization would be something like a landing page or your home page, let's say, right? Home pages usually have a fairly high bounce rate. It's averages maybe roughly 50%. If you're at 30%, it tends to be good. If you're at 70%, that's a bad thing. So being able to keep people around, being able to keep people interested when they land on your page is quite a big thing, right? So, if someone is interested in cosmetics, you might want to show them something related to cosmetics. If someone is interested in hair care, then you might want to show them something related to hair. So that will improve your bounce rate pretty significantly, right? In one of the previous slides, I mentioned that even for general retailers, most people don't browse or purchase in more than a couple of categories. Okay, and this is especially true for retailers, ECs that are growing very fast, that are increasing their assortment very fast. I remember a long time ago when Amazon used to sell only books. It took me a long time before I realized that Amazon actually sold more than just books, right? So when you're adding these new categories to your assortment, how do you actually get people to pay attention, to start browsing and eventually buying in these new categories? Well, the simplest way, of course, is to try paid media. You can, of course, send people advertisements that say, hey, I'm selling this, why don't you click on this and buy this? Now, the problem with paid media, usually, is that it costs money, or it's pretty expensive if you want to do something like this. The other way to do this is to leverage the traffic on your homepage, right? Usually for ECs, people visit fairly frequently, right? So being able to leverage that traffic to tell them that I have new products, I have new categories, is a very important thing. But the problem here is that you don't want to be showing that to everyone all the time, right? So you only want to show this, you only want to be promoting these categories to people who are likely to be interested in that. So that's where the personalization comes in. Okay. Now, another place where we could be using personalization is in app push notifications, right? So you can reach out and remind potential purchasers through app push notifications. Okay, what is an app push notification? Well, here you have this image animation here on the right hand side. It's something that pops up on your phone. You click on it, it brings up the app. Okay, so you want, one way to do this is you want to find people who are potential purchasers who are about to make a purchase, and you want to sort of nudge them a little bit and remind them that, hey, it's time, you might want to start buying something. One example of this a potential purchaser would be someone who has maybe carted something and didn't buy it, so abandoned carts or forgotten carts. But you could take a step further and say, hey, I don't just want to target the people who have left something in their carts, because that's a fairly small number of people, right? What you could also do is you can build an AI model to predict who out of all my customers are most likely to be making a purchase in the next week or so. And using that information, I can actually reach out to them using app pushes to encourage them a little bit. Now, some people might be asking, okay, well, if you're going to do this, why don't you just target everyone, right? App pushes are free, right? It doesn't cost me anything to actually send out this app push. Why don't I just send this app push to everyone, right? The click-through rate or the conversion rate would be lower, but the number of conversions would be higher. So, on the surface, it sounds like a good idea, but it's not really a good idea, because every time we do an engagement with the customers, there is a hidden cost. The hidden cost is that at some point you'll be annoying your customer, right? If you're sending me irrelevant app pushes every day, at some point I'm just going to turn it off. I get turn off the app push notification. In the worst case, I might even uninstall your app. So you don't want to be doing a full blast strategy where I'm sending off these things every day. You want to do this in a well-managed fashion so that you end up with happier customers. Okay. Now, another way to be that we can use personalization is through pop-up in web notifications. Okay, what is the pop-up in web notification? You can see here on the right-hand side, scrolling on the page. At some point, you have something that pops up and tells you something. In this particular case, oh, you're getting a 30% discount off of Mother's Day gifts, right? And this, if used correctly, this can be used to encourage user behavior. And there are multiple ways to do this. For example, you could have a rules-based approach where you say, okay, well, if the user scrolls down to a certain point in my page, I'm going to show them a message. If the user is idle for a certain amount of time, I'm going to show them some sort of message. What we have been able to do is to actually take a step beyond that and predict, of all the users that are currently on my site, which of them are hesitant buyers, okay, based on their activity on the site, which of them are hesitating, and which of them really require that little nudge. Okay? So with that information, I can actually then send them a coupon so that coupon makes sense. Right? You don't want to be sending coupons to people who are going to buy anyways, because that's just lost revenue, right? So being able to precisely target people with coupons where it actually makes sense is good personalization. Now, the next thing that we could do is we could do recommendations, okay? And that will help increase the share of wallets. So for example, if I like tennis, you could show me things like tennis t-shirts, tennis shoes, tennis rackets, etc. The interesting thing about recommendations is that depending on where you are on the site, you might want to have different types of recommendations. So for example, if you're on a home page, typically you want some diversity, right? People expect some sort of diversity or freshness when you're on the home page, okay? But when you're actually browsing at the product level, you typically want to show people products that are very similar to the product that you're currently browsing, right? Because people are at that point of time, they're trying to make a choice as to what to buy, okay? As they get closer to actually making that purchase, as they're getting closer to that payment step, you want to start showing them not similar products, because if you start showing them similar products, that's going to distract them from buying this one that they have already chosen. Rather, you want to show them complementary products, things that will increase your market basket size, right? So depending on where you are on the page, depending on where that person is on their current journey on your site, you want to have different personalization strategies. Okay, so having access to these different tactics for personal recommendations then becomes quite important. Okay, and finally, there's email. Okay, email is tried and true, I would say. These days, email gets a bit of a bad rep, I would say. I think most people have experiences where they sign up on the site, and they start getting emails, promotions from the site. At first, it looks interesting, but after a while, you get bored of it. You don't think it's relevant. You start putting it into some sort of folder somewhere, or maybe you would even put it in your spam folder. So this is a sign of a badly managed email strategy, right? Because typically if people do that, it's mainly because, number one, the frequency is not well managed, and number two, the personalized or whatever's in the email is not relevant to you. That's why we actually do need a good personalization strategy around email. Now, why is that? It's because actually email can be a fairly good vehicle, especially when people are starting to go dormant or starting to churn, right? Because once people are starting to churn and start getting tired of your app or your service, all the other things that we talked about previously will stop working very well. Okay, this is because people will shut off your notifications, people will uninstall your app, people stop coming to your website. So it's actually quite difficult to even reach out to your customers once they're going dormant. Okay, but people still check their emails, right? So you don't want to get to the point where they have already put you in the spam folder or put you in some sort of folder that they never check, right? So that's where we can actually leverage emails to win back dormant customers. Okay, and finally, I'd like to talk about a success story, right? I mean, everything that we have talked about up to now might seem a little theoretical. So here is an actual case where we have actually leveraged AI, all these different AI techniques with a customer, and gotten real results. Okay. So this is what we did. We worked with a leading e-commerce company here in Asia. Okay. The first thing that we did was we helped them with their segmentation, their audience segmentation. Right? So we broke it down into multiple segments. We didn't just do 10 segments. We didn't just do 50 segments. Based on 360 profiles, based on their behaviors, we could actually do 1 million plus segments, right? All of this is automatic, right? So once you have that, you want to start using these segments you want to take these segments and start predicting their LTV, right? That helps me find which segments are the best ones to target. So I can actually run some AI predictions and figure out which of these segments have the best LTV, right? That helps me figure out who I want to target at this particular point of time, okay? But that's not it, that's not all, right? Once we have this, again, this goes back to the question of what am I going to tell them? What am I going to show them, right? I can run these recommendations that I talked about, okay, and generate for each segment, for each person, what is the best product to show them? What's the product that they would most likely be interested in, okay? And using that information, we reached out to them, and that increases conversion volume by 4x, okay? Increases search product rates by 90%, right? And view product rates by 57%, okay? If you want to learn more about this, feel free to download our white paper or contact us, all right? And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Charles. And thanks everyone for listening. We do actually, in fact, have a couple of questions. If it's okay with you, Charles, I'll go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
So first of all, you mentioned that companies store their data across different systems and platforms, and that's often a challenge for organizations. So could you share a bit more about the most effective ways for this data to be integrated, and how could newer companies prevent this issue in the first place?
Yes, that's a good question. A lot of times when you see companies with these multiple silo systems, it's because they were developed from a more legacy or more traditional situation where you have different business units building their own thing, and at some point you end up with these silos across the company. Now, if you are a new company, you can definitely avoid this, right? When you're designing your data platform from scratch, when you're designing your software infrastructure from scratch, you should consider having a centralized data platform, okay? And this is a place where you would be sucking in all of these data from these different business units. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. So this is somewhere where you would be sucking in all of this data from these different business units. You're going to need a team of people to manage this data platform, because it is a fairly large amount of work to make sure that the data is cleaned, is well governed, it is stable, there are no problems with it. But once you have this, it's going to drive everything that you're going to do. I mean, if you need reports, the data is going to come from there. If you need to build AI models, the data will be coming from there. It really makes everything much easier down the road.
Okay, great. We have another one. How do you address the explainability of AI, especially when you explain and pitch the AI model or solution to key stakeholders?
Mm-hmm. Yes, explainability is actually very important in industry. There are some problems that need explainability. There are some problems that don't need explainability. The data scientist who is building these models should understand when explainability is required, when it is not. Sometimes, you just need a model that is as accurate as possible, right? So for example, if someone is who is most likely to click on this button, show them that button, right? I mean, you don't really need to explain that, right? But there are certain cases where explainability becomes very important. In this case, there are certain models that are more amenable to explanations than others, right? So for example, deep learning models are slightly notoriously difficult to explain. There are ways to do that. You can look up, for example, deep learning explainability, or there are techniques called LIME that allows you to do that. But in general, if you're faced with an explainability problem and you know that you're going to have that problem, you probably don't want to be picking a deep learning model. There are other ways that you can be building models that can give you pretty good explainability.
Okay, great. So another one we have is that someone has pointed out personalization can also extend to customer service. So what role can AI play in this particular part of the customer journey or the customer experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we have talked about up till now has mostly been on the marketing side. Right? How do you actually engage with your customers? But you could also think of customer service as part of this whole customer engagement strategy, right? One of the things that you could do is to try and predict if you predicted that someone is about to churn. One way to reach out to them is through customer service. Right. Other ways that we have been able to apply, people have been able to apply AI to customer service is, for example, analyzing all these different customer service touch points from the customers and categorizing them and figuring out what is the best response to this person, right? And that actually helps the customer service representative to serve the customer better. Right? So these are the different ways that you can actually apply AI and personalization to customer service.
Okay, that looks like all we'll be able to address today. So thank you so much, everybody. If you have a question that we didn't address here, please do send us a message and we'd be happy to answer offline. We really appreciate everybody joining today and hope you have a good rest of the week.